I'm your host, Dr. Lori, and welcome to Universally Unique, exploring the neurodiverse world of the extraordinary. This podcast fosters curiosity and understanding about neurodiversity while empowering individuals with tools for acceptance and inclusion in classrooms, the workplace, and communities. Featuring shared stories of neurodiverse life experiences, it sheds light on navigating a world not designed for diversity. Universally Unique starts now. Hi, welcome to Universally Unique. I'm Lori Noto, and my guest today is Susan Petrok, who is the mom of William, who we met with the last time that we had an episode. And what we're going to do today is we'll start the way that we always start with a few breaths. And then Susan's going to kind of give us her perspective on living with a child who is neurodiverse, who's actually really not a child. He's like a totally like grown-up man. But so we'll take a few box breaths. We'll do three. We'll do a count of four for an inhale, a hold, an exhale, a hold. And so I'll just kind of count through. So inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're done. Sue, why don't you give us a little bit of a picture of what your journey was like as Bill's mom, as you folks started to realize that he kind of operated in the world a little differently than other folks.
Yeah, he's an only child on both sides, so it took us a little longer to kind of put the pieces together. But we started noticing about 18 months, some odd behaviors, a mild language delay. But in other ways, he was really meeting all of his milestones, walking and other things, exactly on target. And he was even reading before he was in kindergarten, and which was great, but at the same time, it made it more complicated because he seemed more advanced than he was, and then the opposite in other ways. We were Cub Scout leaders, so we had that's where we had like a social group that we could see him, how he compared with other kids, and where he was, in first grade on the same page kind of socially. By the time he was in like third, fourth grade, we're like, something's not quite right. And it was in fourth grade that he kind of fell apart emotionally one day doing homework that was way too advanced for him. And he's what I refer to as a pressure cooker kid. He'll hold it in, look like he's doing fine, and then explode. And he's an introverted kid, so he goes inward. And we went from holding it together to self-injuring and some pretty, serious behaviors like overnight, just really, really fast. And living in a lower socioeconomic city, I'm like, I've got to figure out what the district's supposed to do so I can make them do it. Because I don't have the money to pay for, lawyers ongoing. And what would this look like? And So that's where we started. I self-studied for about a year and a half, to kind of, figure out how do I advocate, what is special ed law, and what is the district supposed to be doing to help him? Yeah.
So who actually gave him his diagnosis?
We had two different doctors. We first went with Dr. Mayville, who was at the time out of Milford. I forget the name of the organization. Um, and on the first round, he was using the school as one of his primary, sources of information on Bill. And turned out that they were not being forthcoming with information about him and
Hmm.
his performance in school. When they did academic evaluations, it was I don't want to say they flat out lied about test scores, but the test scores were not where they should have been, or they weren't accurate. And it took diligence on my part to gather information to show that they were not being forthcoming, and that took months. And it was by the end of that school year, I wound up having to pull him out of school for a while until we got the evaluations done because they were just like, nope, until he's in special ed, we don't have to do anything. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's a problem. And it was around the holidays. It was just before Christmas. I pulled him out of school and I'm like, no, I can't keep putting him on the bus. Like he, the teachers were mad at me for not having him do homework. And I'm like, I'm sorry, if it takes me 2 hours to get him kind of back to status quo, I am not gonna then stick homework in front of him. That
No.
call me a bad parent if you want. I'm not doing that. And then they would make him kind of like penalize him in the morning and make it like, oh, you have to go write your name on the board because you didn't do your homework. And I'm like, this is like double punishment. It was horrible. Yeah. And they weren't gonna change anything until he was in special ed. And I'm like, okay, and then he's out of school until we have a PPT meeting. And so they through the through the spring, he was in on a half day basis, um, and was still struggling. They really didn't put any sort of accommodations. He wasn't seeing the resource teacher. And I mean, I didn't even know how to look at goals and objectives and what those were supposed to look like
Yeah.
back then. Um, but I was able to gather enough information that Dr. Mayville was like, okay, I'm gonna dismiss everything that the school was saying, and I need to see him in another location. And he went to see him at summer camp at Cub Scout camp, and immediately was like, "Yep, no, I see everything that that you were talking about. Matches what I saw in the office." And he gave him a diagnosis of Asperger's.
Hmm.
Um, at the time, like it was probably like February or so. I'm like, okay, I'm not sure we're gonna get Dr. Mayville off of the fence, So I'm like, let me get my name in with another doctor. And that
Yeah.
was Dr. Loomis. And so the first round of evaluations that Mayville had done, he just said, no, this is like just ADHD. So
Okay.
going to the Asperger's was actually a change in diagnosis.
Yep.
So it was good to have Dr. Loomis's evaluation as well to corroborate, the change in diagnosis. And he saw Dr. Loomis a couple of weeks after that second time that Dr. Mayville had seen him. And Dr. Loomis did academic testing. Dr. Mayville had left that up to the school. And where the school, and there's a lot of discrepancies, but the biggest was in math. And the school district said he was, Johnny on the spot, had a 101, solid middle of the average range. And Dr. Loomis's score in the same area was a 51, which is
Wow. It's a pretty
like,
big difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
huge, huge difference. And it's kind of like, okay, we got the school district to pay for that evaluation, and that other report kind of like disappeared from Bill's file eventually. And Yeah, so like once we got him into, you know, got those diagnoses, we were able to request a change of school within the district to one a district, I mean not a district, a school in the district that I knew had a really good team.
Yep.
It was a little bit of a drive for him, but I was just like, no, it's like I've heard good things about this team. That's where we need to be for fifth grade.
Good.
And it was a world of a difference. But it took them till February to get him to actively engage in academics. That's how shut down he had become during that fourth grade year. It was a year and a half lost.
Well,
Um,
it seems
yeah.
like there's kind of two layers here, and
Mhm.
I think you obviously would know these things now that you've gone back to school to become a special education
Yeah.
teacher, is that he you thought something was kind of off when he was young, but not no one was really picking up on it. Might have picked up on it if it was happening right in this current day and age. But
Yeah.
when Bill was that age, they probably wouldn't have noticed it. Um, and also after all the stuff that happened in fourth grade, that was a trauma response that
Mhm.
nobody knew what to do with,
Yeah.
which hopefully at this point in time in our educational system, we're at least acknowledging
Right.
that there's a variety of ways that people are traumatized. You don't necessarily have to live in a war zone to
Exactly. Yeah.
to
But he
have.
was sort of in his head. He
Yeah, for
was,
him it
yeah, yeah.
was. Yeah.
And
It was
so yeah,
overwhelming.
it was a journey. And like you alluded to, I went back to school and it was like I'm like, okay, I studied for a year and a half to figure that what am I going to do with all this information I've got in my head?
Yeah.
That's all unofficial information. And I just felt inspired to it's like, okay, what about all these kids whose parents don't do this or
Yeah.
can't do this? And so that's what motivated me to go back to school. And
Well, and I think there's a real challenge when you
mhm,
do have families that, for whatever reason, are not in a position
right.
to be advocating. Kids
Yeah.
get left by the
Yep.
wayside. Even the ones that have the understanding and maybe even the means to do so, it's a full-time job,
It is. Yeah. Yep.
and it takes up a great deal of time. So it sounds like getting that diagnosis was obviously huge. What other things kind of during the course of his development really kind of stick out for you? Whether, maybe some big monumental milestones that he accomplished that folks maybe weren't completely certain that he would get to, or other things that kind of stick in your mind as
Um,
memories.
I know there's so many. I think that the biggest thing was going through the layers. I had a a lady that I knew through my church who used to be an administrator down in the Newtown area, and she referred to kids like Bill as Swiss cheese. That you had some really, really solid areas and then varying size deficits or holes. And you could
Hmm.
be slicing through a solid area, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a little bit of a hole there. And then you go down a little bit further and you're like, whoa, like that's a huge, how's he functioning
Yeah.
given the size of this deficit? And that I was like, understanding um the classes that I liked the best in my bachelor's degree, which is in psychology, were like cognitive psychology and understanding how the brain learns, how it operates, how it functions. And those are the things that help me the most to kind of pick through those layers and understand why is there this hidden deficit down underneath something else that really looks solid. So even today, his biggest area of difficulty is auditory processing. And it's like it comes in, it's almost like dyslexia for the hearing.
Yeah.
He'll hear the beginning of something and the end of something and miss the entire chunk in the middle. And depending on the pieces that he misses, depends on his general understanding. So once I figured out about that, I'm like, okay, now I've got to come up with some ways to help him learn how to kind of needle through and check himself or to ask questions. And then Same thing with some of the other deficit areas in autism. His perception of social situations would be often very askew, which is a common
Yep.
difficulty with kids with autism. And so I just started, using different tools. He was very visual. Um, so as I was learning, teaching, I'm like, oh, like concept mapping, let's use this socially.
Yeah.
And I would problem solve out with him. I had a huge, whiteboard in my house, looked like a classroom. And I would just kind of like, okay, like, like there was one, he was, they thought he was hearing impaired for a while. And they gave him hearing aids, which just amplified all his
Oh
sensory
gosh,
issues. It was a
must have
nightmare.
made it worse.
Yeah. But so he didn't want to wear them. So like they gave him an FM unit. And he was like, okay, trying to ditch this, telling lies to everybody. I was just like, oh my God. And to get him to understand like this, like what is your problem? What is the, and then draw a picture of him in the middle, and get him to say, it's just like, Mom, it amplifies everything. I can hear her heartbeat,
Oh
and it was
gosh.
just like, oh my gosh, okay.
Yeah.
So sensory overload, once you're overloaded that way, you're not processing anything else because you're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, so what did you say to this person over here? The nurse wasn't there. I couldn't get it. Or tell this other teacher, oh, I don't have to use it anymore. And then tell somebody else something over here. And I'd be like, okay, so, now let's look at all these little bubbles we got. Do
Yeah.
any of these solve your problem? And he's like,
No.
And it was just visually, you could help him kind of piece together how things went. And it's like as soon as and like he was sharing with you, that it's like I got to do it and then I
Yeah.
understand it. And so I was
Mhm.
making it like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to walk through this. We're going to break it down and so that's been a huge tool that I used for him.
I think his
Yeah.
his interaction skills are actually quite good.
Hmm.
And I would see that people would not necessarily notice where the holes in the Swiss cheese are
Yep.
or recognize that when they say something and they spew out a whole bunch of information at once, he may be there nodding and
Oh
smiling or
yeah.
whatever, and
He can
because
yup
he's doing the right
people
thing
like a pro.
socially,
They're
but
like,
then he
yep.
has no idea what
Yeah, exactly.
happened there, and people
Yeah.
don't pick up on that
Mhm.
because I mean, for those of us who spent time with people on the spectrum, we pick up on different things. But for people who don't know, he
Hmm.
doesn't look like what I think people think a person with autism
Right.
looks like. He
Yeah.
doesn't have a lot of really obvious mannerisms or anything like that,
Hmm.
you know, except for what he told us the other day about how he likes to keep talking about a topic and people don't really want
Yeah.
to talk about it
He
anymore.
used to have more repetitive behaviors when he was younger, but it's true to form with somebody who's, higher functioning on the spectrum. They learn how to hide it and
Yeah.
incorporate it into something else so it looks
Yeah,
normal.
and I think
Hmm.
that masking takes
Yeah.
a lot of energy.
Yes, it
So
does.
I would
And it
anticipate that by the time he got home from school, he was exhausted.
yeah.
His brain was exhausted, his body was exhausted, he was exhausted.
Yeah, his whole system was exhausted. And but yeah, it was it's been a hurdle even with like he went to where I now work as a teacher, the Focus Center for Autism, and professionals. He went there for social skills training for years before they had the school. And I was sitting in a meeting with him and a couple of the clinicians, and we were talking about coming up with new goals and objectives for him to be working on. And one of them is talking, and I'm like, bet he doesn't know what she's talking about. And I'm like, hey, Bill, do you know what yeah, I know. And he was just like nodding, going, yeah,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know,
Well, he's very
yeah,
polite. I mean, he's
yes.
exceptionally polite. So I
Yeah.
could imagine that he would
Mhm.
just keep
He
saying,
flew
yeah.
so far under the radar. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me maybe a couple things that you're just like really super proud of him for.
Um, his perseverance and his courage. Um, it's when he left school, high school, uh, as he had described, he went through several years where he just really was isolated because he was overwhelmed. And it took a lot of courage for him to kind of step back out.
Hmm.
And um, because now it's doing it with much less support than he had had when he was in school. And that even in the face of like he mentioned that he worked at one of the wineries, and when
Yep.
they closed for COVID, they restructured their kitchen and they eliminated his position, and they
Oh.
didn't offer him his job back.
Mm.
And they were trying to be polite. And it's like, oh, yeah, down the road. And I'm like, just tell him no, because it's like he needs to know that it's going to be a no. And so when he got that news, they were like, oh, he'd have to use a knife. And I was like, so teach him how to use a knife, why is that a problem? And that's what gave him the motivation to want to go to Lincoln Tech, to show them, like, no, I can use a knife. Like, what do you mean? Like, you
Yeah.
didn't give me a chance to show you that I could do this.
Yeah.
And so someplace in those 2 years of kind of, spinning his wheels at home and having, a few months of positive experience in a job where he wasn't overwhelmed, he was supported by the people that were at the winery. That he, all of a sudden was like, wait a minute, no, I can do this,
Do this.
and so like them saying no kind of put a fire under him.
Yeah.
And it was brave of him, because like when he tried to do a class at Naugatuck Valley, it was a disaster. It was like he got up,
It
he
shared that.
walked out.
Yeah.
I get this panic phone call. I'm like, where are you? I'm walking. Where are you walking? I'm like in school, like freaking out. Like, do I have to leave? And so it was just it was horrid. It was really bad. And so just having that courage to go back and try it again. Much different academics, in a trade school like Lincoln Tech. It's probably like 80% hands-on, kind of work in the kitchen, and then like 20% academics, and those academics aren't, like heavy academics like you would have in a traditional like community college or university.
Well, and they
Um,
were linked to what it was that he
right,
was wanting
exactly.
to do. So it
Yes.
all
It was
kind of
all
went together.
associated, and like, oh, I don't have to learn algebra because I don't need that in the kitchen,
Yeah. I just need
And
to know that I
yeah.
shouldn't serve people certain kinds of food at a
Yep.
temperature that's lower
Mhm.
than
Exactly. How do I,
165 or something. Yeah.
convert, measurements and whatnot. And so he did it. I mean, he wound up pulling a B, and I
Oh.
really didn't give him much like tutoring and coaching through a lot of that. He wanted to do it on his own. So
Well, and he
um
shared with us when we did his episode that he passed the
yeah.
food service test,
Mhm.
which he had
Yeah,
not been
he didn't
successful.
even tell us that he was doing that. He's like, I didn't want everybody like, how you doing? How you doing? How you do? He didn't want the pressure of us being anxious to see how he was going to do. So he just came home one day walking in with his little, and we're like, wait a minute, what? Like, oh my God,
But I think that's a
those are the things.
testament to his
Yeah.
perseverance,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
a skill that's so incredibly useful for a whole array of
Mhm.
reasons. And so
And
I give
so
him,
hard to
yeah,
teach and instill in people. In
almost
students.
impossible.
It
Yeah.
is.
I mean, even for a neurotypical individual
Mhm.
to learn to have perseverance
Yeah.
is challenging. So
Yep.
I guess it's good he's genetically predisposed to perseverance. Um, so
Yeah.
what kinds of things are you doing to sort of help him continue to become more independent?
Um, we kind of like in the past couple of years, since we've been working at Taft, it's more like coaching from the sidelines as opposed to being in the game with them.
Hmm.
We do have connection with like the person the office person. So like when he, like, oh, we're having trouble with his insurance, and we tried relaying through him, but with his processing, it was like getting muddled up, and we're like,
Yeah.
just call her,
Yeah.
and but we're trying to do that as little as we possibly can. And just like when he's having a difficult time, it's like, okay, talk to me about it. Like getting him to, develop that skill of like kind of, decompressing and talking through, a difficult day or a difficult time. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you doing to try to help yourself? Well, I'm doing this. It's like, awesome. That's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. So sometimes just encouragement and, and that pat on the back. It's like, no, you're doing it. It's like, yes, this is difficult. It's graduation season, and you're super busy because there's a more of a turnover of meals and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where his energy tanks, and like he'll come home and just be like really overwhelmed. And I'm like, but you're getting through it. And how many more days do you have? You got 2 more days. You can do this. And so it's kind of like I said, cheerleading from the sidelines. And the other thing is he's developed a really good like social network around him as well, which is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been able to establish, kind of nominal level of relationship with those people, you know. So when he's going through something really, really difficult, and I'm like, oh, I know he's talking to this one. Let me just pop them a message like, hey, if you think I need to intervene, you tell me. Otherwise, I'm
Okay.
letting it go. And he's like, yep, I got him. I'll let you know if I, hear something off.
Wonderful.
And so and same kind of thing with his personal counselor, that it's like, nope, you're going, you're doing it. I don't need to be there,
Yeah.
but it's like somebody give me the heads up if we need to, you know, intervene on a deeper level.
Yeah.
So,
No, I think
yeah.
his growth has been remarkable. I'm very impressed by his ability to recover. He had a little trouble getting on
Yeah.
the Zoom when we met, and I knew he was having trouble, but when he got on, you had no idea that he had
That's
had a problem. He had within seconds figured out either how to hide it from us or he
Mhm.
regrouped. And I think he regrouped. We
Yeah.
also did some breaths because that's just what we do anyways.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably helpful for him. Um, Unfortunately, Sue, our half hour
Oh my
went by
gosh.
super fast.
It did.
And, I keep having these thoughts as I'm talking to people that, sometimes a half hour is really, really quick. So, there's always the possibility we may do some follow-up at some future point in time, sort of maybe check back in with you and with Bill to see how things are going. But I
Yeah.
appreciate you taking the time to meet with us. I appreciate you and Bill being the first of my parent child combo coming in to give our listeners a bit of an idea of what it's like to be in a family with an individual who is um, neurodiverse.
Yeah.
So I'm going to wrap this up. If
Yeah.
anybody is looking to contact me, there's a couple ways that you can reach me, either through my website at notoconsulting.com or through my email address, which is notoconsulting2002@gmail.com. So thank you all very much for listening and have a great day. Thank you for listening to Universally Unique, exploring the neurodiverse world of the extraordinary. Join me, Dr. Lori, on Transformation Talk Radio every second and fourth Monday at 11:30 Pacific Time as we continue to explore navigating a world not designed for diversity. For advocacy and support for individuals with disabilities, let's connect. Learn more about consulting and life coaching at notoholisticconsulting.com.